If you're like me, you probably hate being judged, and yet, who wants to be taken for a ride? So, how do we balance it? Welcome back. I'm Gila Ross, author of Living Beautifully and host of the Power Up podcast, where we share short, relatable ideas to impact and upgrade your everyday life. What is the Jewish approach? And you may find it a little bit surprising. If you've heard it before, you may find it surprising because I think a lot of us kind of think that we shouldn't judge other people. That's not actually the Jewish approach. What is the Jewish approach? So this is based on a verse in the Torah where it says, you should not commit a distortion of justice as judge in court. You should not favor the poor nor honor the great. With righteousness, you should judge your fellow. Right, so the Hebrew is b'tzedek tishpot amitecha. That's where this mitzvah comes from. And the Talmud talks, explains what it means because the way the Torah was given, it was given in two parts, the written law and the oral law. And the oral law explains what the written law means, because b'tzedek tishpot amitecha, what does that mean to judge people? What does it mean? And so the Talmud says a couple of things, right? Number one is this doesn't just, obviously, it refers to court cases, right? When someone goes to court, there is a mitzvah that you have to judge justly, right? You have to judge with justice. You're not allowed to accept a bribe. You're not allowed to do what's going to further you politically or whatever it is. And the Rashi explains that judge your fellow favorably, right? Having done et chaver lekaf, which means judge people favorably, is part of this mitzvah that is teaching us that each of us, right? In our own mind, we have little court cases going on the whole time, right? And in the court of our mind, the mitzvah is to judge people favorably, right? And if you think about it, it's almost contrary to human nature, right? Because human nature is that we see someone do something and we jump to conclusions, right? To borrow Cheryl's example, someone drives past you and you're like, oh my goodness, right? Someone cuts in front of you and instead of thinking to yourself, like, wow, that person didn't see me, they're like, how rude, right? That's human nature is to jump to conclusions. So the Torah is actually telling us, no, we want your obligation is to judge people favorably. We're going to look into what the details is, but before we do that, there's a big question that I want to ask, right? And if I may, Jenny said, judge, right? Which I thought was very brave, because the reality is, as much as none of us want to be judged, the reality is we all judge, right? We make judgments the entire. So,
But you need to be aware what is around. The judgment is part of being aware of our surroundings.
what's the downside of not judging? Tell me.
It's a disregard. Like there's
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
The Torah, Judaism, wants us to be involved in the community, right? And there's that, what did you call it? Disrespect. Yeah, like disrespect. Like,
we want to
yes, like that's engagement, right? Like, oh, it's all, it's all okay, right? Where does it come from? There's a cute little story that's told about a woman she saw a little kid crying. So she was walking towards the little kid and she's like, oh, don't worry, everything will be fine. Everything will be fine. You'll be fine. And she gets a bit closer and she's like, it's the kid, all right? And like, people stopped and like, what's going on? Like, you saw that the child was injured and crying beforehand. What suddenly changed that you went from calm and it's all fine to panicking? She says, I realize that's my grandson. What it kind of shows that when we don't judge, we're removing ourselves from the situation and the community. And that's not how we're supposed to be as Jews, right? As Jews, we're supposed to care and we're supposed to care for one another and we're supposed to care also for moral justice, right? Because it's interesting, I gave this class on Monday. At the very end of the class, someone asked me a question and it was like, what about a situation where it doesn't harm anyone? In that sort of situation, should you or shouldn't you judge? What would you say to that question?
It harms you. It harms you. That's your that. decision in your brain, it takes you down that path. You said, all right, there's no neutral. You're either positive or negative, maybe you're running closer to one side or closer to the other side.
So that's what I said is I said, I can't think of a situation that doesn't have an impact on someone else, right? We like to think of us, especially when we're not living up to the way we should. We like to kind of think that we live in a bubble and like, this is my problem. The reality is it's not how it is, right? We're social creatures, we're social beings, and God created the world in a way that the physical world is a analogy to the spiritual world. And in the physical world, there's a physical ecosystem, right? Which we as science wasn't always aware of it, right? So there've been situations where like a frog became extinct, right? So who cares if a little frog becomes extinct?
Can affect other things.
We care very much because it impacts the whole ecosystem, right? And I don't know facts off the top of my head, but it's fascinating to Google it. But there are situations where like a little fly was introduced to an environment and it changed the entire impact, or a little fly became extinct and the whole ecosystem collapsed, right? Because every single part of it is connected and is part, the ones that eat it and the ones that it feeds, right? Like, which keeps everything in balance. It's the same thing with art, and we see this, right? You see, like, if you send your kids to a school where like no one's really cares if anyone's on time, and what happens is no one really cares, and then less people care, right? If you send your kids to a school where everyone is on time, then most people are on time, right? People stick to that because it has an impact, and not all of it is top down. A lot of it is, people, especially when we take school, for example, right, or a community, when someone steps into a leadership there and they're trying to change, or an organization, they're trying to change the culture. It's extremely hard. I mean, there is a massive impact on top down, but it's an ecosystem, right? It's a spiritual ecosystem. So you're right that besides for the fact that we're supposed to be we're supposed to be a community and we're supposed to be involved with each other, but also we're supposed to care about what's wrong and what's right, right? And we do care when it comes to like big, I don't know, there was a stabbing in England with children a couple of days ago in Southampton. There's an outrage about that, as there should be, right? Because when we care, there's an outrage, right? And that's the sensitivity we're supposed to have. We're not supposed. So when it comes to people telling the truth or not, it's very easy to kind of say, well, whatever, everyone has their version of the truth, but we lose our sensitivity for the truth. We lose our sensitivity for the right and the wrong, and that's why the Torah doesn't tell us don't judge, because that's not a good situation to be in. Human nature is we judge, right? And we need to judge, right? Because we need to make those calls on whether people around us are good for us or not good for us, safe, not safe, whether things are right or wrong. So instead, the Torah tells us judge, faith. Let me give you a story.
Okay, it's about Jews, between Jews and Jews, or Jews and anybody.
Okay, so let's go into it's a very good question, but we'll go into the details of it. I'm gonna double check that. But let's go into the details of what the mitzvah means, because I'm gonna give you a story of what it means to judge people favorably. And anyone that's read my book, you might recognize the story because it's in my book. So there's this family that are living in Israel. Their names are I don't know, it's been a while since I read that. It's been a while since I read that, right? So they're the triangle, and they're living in Israel in a community, a small, tight-knit community in Israel. Their daughter gets engaged and they're planning the wedding, and it's incredible and it's very exciting and it's also very stressful. So and it's expensive. So what the community says is they know the triangles and what well to do. And they said, you know what we're going to do as a community, we're going to raise money so that will help them with the cost of the wedding a little bit. So they did that as a community. The friends got together, they raised a little bit of money, they gave it to the triangles for the wedding. They all invited to the wedding, they come to the wedding, and there's a bit of a outrage, agitation. Why? Because they're sitting at the wedding and the catering is like extravagant, really, really extravagant. And all these families are sitting there and thinking to themselves, hold on a second, like we gave our charity dollars to support a wedding that is on a fancier level than we would put on for our own kids. Like, what's going on here? And the gift is given already, the money's given already, and the wedding is, the catering is, what are they going to do? But as you can imagine, there's murmuring and there's talk and there's the, and obviously it gets back to the finals at some point. And there's silence first. And eventually the finals, through whoever, tell the community what happened. And they said, you should know when we got to the wedding, we were as shocked as you. Because that's not the catering that we had ordered. And after the wedding, we went over to them and we said to them, like, what? So he says, remember when you came to us and you were telling us you were planning your daughter's wedding, so what did we do? What's the first thing we did? What's the first thing you do when you meet another Jew? Teach geography. Teach geography. And remember, I told you that your father helped my father and helped set him up in business, right? And my father was in a terrible situation at that point. And your father really helped our family so much. And when it came to the wedding, we were like, yes, we know that you were taught the basic menu, but there was no way we were going to do that. And the caterer said to them, we're giving you this extravagant menu, right? We're giving you a thing, and we're not charging you for it, right? This is our thank you to your family for helping our family out, right? What's this? So let me ask you a question, right? You hear the story. Were the people who got upset, were they right or were they wrong?
They didn't know the full story and
They didn't know the full story yet. So were they right or were they wrong?
then president
Right? Because they didn't know. Yep.
I think they were wrong because if I was in that situation, if I was a community member, and then I was invited to that wedding and I ate that food, I'm like, you spent it on, you spent it on. So I think this is a perfect example of how I would process it, because it's our natural instinct to be like, what? How did they get this level of catering? But then, because that's our human nature to like judge. But then the second step is to like challenge yourself and your own thoughts and judgment and be like, well, maybe there was a gift that I don't know about, or maybe like they had a great aunt that decided to like over the cake. Like, so that's the challenge of judgment, I feel like. And we judge, and then it's that whole trial that I'm like, that's the challenge of changing the
I think the great story in your mind. Maybe it's because the customer sensory smell. I got this catering, yes, very glad, but I still contributed to helping in the way that I could. Maybe there was somebody else who felt even better than I did. Maybe there was a huge donation. But the caterers themselves. And
Yeah.
then as a guest, like you don't know. You're going at a story, so how did it make one?
If I may,
Yes.
so for me, I'm sure in my head, the first thing would be like, wow, like how did they pull this off? Like, did they not need the money? But then in my head, I would still say, I gave this because I wanted to help. And what they do with it is up to them. And if something's gonna come greater, then it's not my business. I did what I needed to do in my heart to help them. And if they had more money and I didn't know it, that's not my issue. I gave because I gave from my heart.
Okay. And I want to say something. I want to say, like, I think it's human nature to judge, right?
Yeah.
And it's human nature, I think, in that sort of situation for the first reaction to be like, hold on a second. And there's a positive to it. What's the positive to it is because at the end of the day, these are charity dollars. And if you're giving charity dollars, which we all have an obligation to give charity dollars, we want to make sure our charity dollars is going to charity, right? We do have when eventually when we come and learn the laws of charity, there's a hierarchy of who we give to, right? And there's also we want to give to, if you know there's an organization that's very, very well, right? They pay the CEOs like obscene amounts of money, and very little bit of the actual charity dollars goes to the cause. Are you going to be inclined to support that? Should you be inclined to support that?
No.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong before the fact in investigating it and saying, actually, you know what, this charity looks like they are taking they're using it more efficiently. let me put it in there, and in fact, it's a good thing, right? Because you want to make sure that your charity dollars are good. After the fact, it's a different situation anyway. But they were wrong. Why? Because they had a story, right? And here's the thing. I think the older we get, the more hopefully we recognize that we never know the story,
Yeah.
right? There is so much about that goes on in a person's life that we know so little or almost nothing about. That can we jump to conclusions? Can we? No, right? Like, besides for anything else, besides for the benefits of the medicine, which we'll talk about in a moment, like, don't jump to conclusions because we're so bad at it. We so often get it wrong. And we so often jump to conclusions and we get it wrong, right? Should they, were they right? Were they wrong? But that's what 100% understandable. But they were wrong, and we'll see when we look at the laws and who's supposed to judge favorably why they were wrong as well. Before we do that, I want to ask what are the benefits of judging other people favorably? Like the Torah actually, why is there such an emphasis in Jewish law? Jenny, yeah. Sorry?
I think
Jenny, Sarah.
important because like you're opening yourself up to opportunity, to connection, to relationships. If you are judging negatively, you're gonna just shut everyone out and shut down and live a life like a silo.
Yeah. And Cheryl, were you gonna say something?
Sure, I mean, it,
Yeah.
if you're judging favorably the other party, they can feel, they can sense it. And, ultimately creates octane, creates community. And if you're not judging favorably, negatively, it destroys things. It destroys friendships and relationships.
Absolutely.
I think I 100% agree with both Annie and Sharon. I also had the concept that it will affect you as well. It's the more what you see is what you put out is what you receive back.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you're living in a world where everything is negative and everyone's out to get me and this person is this, that, and the other, that's what you're experiencing. And then you take that with you wherever you go in new situations as well. But if you can put yourself into a more positive frame of mind for others, then it has that effect on you.
I agree with the judgment. Yes.
Yeah, we all want that. Yes, Alina.
I have a question. In a good community with good people, this is the right way to do it. But sometimes when we judge favorably bad people, we can miss the opportunity and react and fix something. That
So-
is
Yeah, excellent question. We're going to go to in a second. I just want to wrap up the point that was brilliant question, but that's the next point that we're going to go to. But I just want to go back to what we were all saying is, and we sense it ourselves, right? Imagine you're meeting a friend for coffee, and you're sitting there, and it's 15 minutes, it's 20 minutes, it's half an hour, and you're like, does she not respect my time? And you're getting annoyed, and maybe it's just me. That would be like, you're like a half an hour, right? And then she walks in, she's like, oh my gosh, you have no idea what happened. I was literally about to leave and the dishwasher flooded all over my house. Like, how do you internally change, right? Like you suddenly stop and you're like, oh, okay, right? Like is when it comes to judging favorably. And this is, it's related to, we'll go into a little bit details next session, but it's related a little bit to the mitzvah of loving other people.
I was just gonna say, it's seeing beyond yourself.
Beyond yourself, loving other people. Now, how does the Torah tell us to love other people? It says, love them like yourself. When we miss so often, we find a million excuses for ourselves, right? Like, yeah, I didn't plan on being on time, but whatever. I left a few minutes late and I just had to finish that email and I just had to, right? We find so many excuses or, like, whatever it is, right? And that sort of way, again, we'll go into a little bit more next session, but the idea that we can lend other people that sort of leeway, right? We say like, it's my personality. I struggle with timekeeping, right? So maybe it's this person also struggles with timekeeping. Does it make it right? Not necessarily, but at least we can give them compassion that hopefully we would be giving ourselves as well. Now, the question that's burning around this table, right, is does the Torah want us to be naive, right? You know what? That's so much, right? The Torah does not want us to be naive. In fact, that's what the Talmud is, right? The Torah is all focused on these are your obligations as a human being, and this is how you have to treat other people. And the Talmud is all about this is what you should do if if other people don't treat you right? It doesn't expect us to be naive at all. So how do we balance this idea, mitzvah, right? It's not just an idea and it's not just a good thing to do, but it's actually a commandment to judge other people favorably with not being naive. So the Torah gives us, it says the reputation of the person matters, right? So there are three different categories. Okay, so and I'll explain to you what three different categories are because it's a little bit detailed, right? So the first is a tzaddik.
This is what.
A tzaddik. A tzaddik is someone, not what you are going to think, which is someone who's righteous. It's in this particular law. It's someone who is known to always act correctly in a certain area of Jewish law, of Torah law, and interpersonal relationships. So you're sitting there for coffee and your friend is showing up and she's 15 minutes late and she always shows up on time. Under these circumstances, she's considered a tzaddik, a righteous person with timekeeping, and we have an obligation to judge her favor. Similarly, someone always keeps Shabbat and we see them in a car on Shabbat. At that point, we have an obligation to judge them favor. Something's gone on in their life. Maybe there's a medical emergency that they have to go to. That's number one, right? So that's situations where we kind of have to get creative and sort of say, I wonder what's going on. And sometimes the truth is, as long as we have that understanding that I don't know what's going on, we don't have to come up with the answer, right? We can just say, look, this person is always on time. If she's late, there must be something ongoing, right? So that's number one. The second category of person is someone who is called a Rosh, right? And it's similar. It's the opposite of that. It's someone who is known to always act incorrectly in a certain area of Torah law and interpersonal relationships, right? So you have a friend who always shows up late. You're sitting there at the coffee shop and she's 15 minutes late. Do you have to give her the benefit of the doubt? No, you don't. No, you don't have to because she's always late. Okay. We'll talk about what that means.
So that's always, I was interpreting, like, oh, it's not, I wouldn't judge it negatively because it's stand. It's their normal.
Okay, the truth is, let's just say you have, okay, yeah, that's a normal, and I don't know if standing is telling, it's not a nice thing to do, being late, right? Because you are keeping someone late. So we're like, oh, there she goes, late again. It is a little bit of a judgment call on that person. But in that sort of situation, they're always late, it's to be naive, right? Someone borrows money, never pays back, or never pays back the full amount. Do you have to judge them favorably? No, don't lend the money then, right? You give charity to someone, and you know that that person is going to use it for something drugs. Do you have to give them, always, right? Do you have to give them benefit of the doubt? No. So this is a situation where don't be naive, right? This person has a reputation of always doing this wrong thing in this particular area of law or interpersonal relationships. You don't have to give them the benefit of the doubt. The third is and in that sort of situation, it is good to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? So what's important to note here is that the Torah recognizes that people are multifaceted, right? So you can have someone who is scrupulously honest and I don't know, sorry,
A liar? Wait, are you doing what
no, I'm saying scrupulously honest and very, very stingy, right? And not charitable. Right, so that sort of person would be someone who's considered the tzaddik when it comes to telling the truth, and a rich when it comes to doing charity. Right? So it's not dependent. Sorry, someone who is, but it's dependent on the person's reputation in this particular area of things, right? Which again goes back to we judge the action, not the person.
Right, you need them for coffee, but you don't buy them
because you know that they're bad with money and they're gonna spend it on something. Right? Like you can say like, I still want to meet you because you're always on time, but I know you're bad with this because you're gonna spend the money unwisely in this other capacity, so I know I'm not loaning you time.
It could be a situation like that. It could be a situation like that, or it could be, I don't know, anything, right? But again, it's the idea of balancing that, judging the people favorably, together with not being naive, right? Don't be naive. If someone has a reputation of always doing the thing, you lend every time you lend them money, you lend them $10, they don't pay back, or you lend them a book and they send it back dog-eared and ripped, whatever. Like, you that's who they are, right? So you don't have to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Except that's who they are, and then you don't have to think. But somebody who you don't know, then it is it's good thing to give them the benefit of the doubt. Yeah,
Like why he is a lion or
Yeah.
whatever.
And we're gonna go into details in that exactly, but that's a great example, for example, right? You can have someone who's consistent liar and consistently kind. Two different character traits, right? People can have it. We'll talk about, I'm doing a new series starting next week, which is called Towards a Compassionate World. And one of them is we're going to talk about what it really means to have empathy for other people.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I'd love to hear your feedback, and if you enjoyed this episode, you'll love my book, Living Beautifully: How to Bring Meaning, Joy, and Love into Your Life, based on the timeless wisdom of Pirkei Avot. And please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out. Have a wonderful day.